small topic is there that I will try to complete. Then after you have today's quiz also. Why? Because with today we bind off your subject topics as well the quizzes also, so that we can start fresh from the next class, right? The second unit. Is it okay for you? So let's wait for 5 more minutes. Let's see the count. If the count is like 48, 49, 50 like that, then I will start the quiz of your previous class. So you take the quiz for that. Then we try to complete the OS structures, last topic, right? Then after we'll take the quiz of today's, right? Today's quiz also I will start, right? So that we can wind off your unit 1 with today's class, right? Is that okay for you? Please reply in the chat box. At 10:10, I will start the quiz sharp. Right? At sharp 10:10, I'm going to start the quiz, right? If you have any concerns, you can post me in the chat box. I am available. Yeah, okay, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Your quiz is on, your previous class quiz. So please take the quiz. Can you able to take the quiz? The previous class quiz. Do let me know. Okay, ma'am. Okay. is at 10:40. So please start your submissions. Am I audible? Are you getting me? I'm going to stop the quiz at 10:40. So start your submissions now. Yes, can I stop the quiz? Still anybody yet to submit? 1 minute. Okay, okay. Yes, I am ending the quiz, ma. Then take your break. I think you have break now, 10:50 to 11. So instead you take now. I will start the class at 10:55. Is that okay for you? Inka 5 minutes entama. Okay, in your break time, the quiz will be on. Right? So 10:55, I will be starting the class at any cost. You have one more quiz to take, ma, and I have two topics to cover. Sai Deepika, please submit your quiz. Is that okay for you? You after the quiz, you take the break for 10 minutes. Your 10 minutes break time is there, no? So at sharp 10:55, so I will come and take the class. Right? Okay? Say yes or no. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. So I stopped your quiz. Yes. Hello. You are there? Can I start the class? Please respond now. Shall I start the class now? Hello, students. Am I audible? Maunika, please log in with your roll number, ma. Yes. Okay. So, in the last class, we are done with system calls, system programs, right? Yes or no? And what is the other topic we discussed in the last class? Yeah, types of system calls we have seen. And OS services, right? So we discussed about OS services, then system calls, then system programs, right? So today we try to see the concepts OS design and implementation. It is the small topic, ma. Then we have the main topic called different operating system structures, right? So with this, we are going to complete your unit 1, right? Yes, let's come with this OS design and implementation, right? So normally, right, when you are designing and implementing the operating system, right, I can say design and implementation of operating system is not solvable, but some approaches have proven successful. All right. So mainly this points you can take down. Internal structure of different operating systems can vary widely. Why? Because different operating systems, they have different structures, right? So let's start with defining the goals, then mechanisms and the policies, then we start with the implementation, right? So what do you mean by design goals, right? So here design goals is nothing but choice of the hardware and the requirement specification, right? I can say design goals is nothing but choice of hardware which comes with the user goals and the requirement specification which comes with the system goals, right? So you take user goals, design of operating system will be affected by the choice of the hardware and the type of the system, right? Such as batch, time sharing, single user, multi-user, distributed, real-time, or general purpose, right? So based on the type of the hardware we choose, right? Type of the hardware we choose, that affects the design of the system. Like for the batch systems, the hardware may be different. For time sharing, for single user, for multi-user, right? Then distributed, real-time, general purpose. That means for different types of systems, the choice of hardware is different. Based on the choice of the hardware, your design goals will differ. And coming to the requirement specification, here when you see the requirements, they may be much harder to specify. Hardware you can choose, right? But if you take the requirements of your system, right? So these are much harder to specify. So Mainly, if you take the requirements can be like whenever the user is using them, right? It should be convenient to use, easy to learn, reliable, safe, and fast, right? But it is coming to this user. The user wants the system should be convenient to use, easy to learn, reliable, safe, and fast. When it is coming to the system should be easy to design, implement, and maintain, right? Here the system should be flexible, reliable, error-free, and efficient. Clear for you all? Choice of the hardware and the requirement specification. Right. Next, coming to the mechanisms and the policies. I can say what is mechanism is. Mechanism determine how to do something. Policies determine what will be done. Policies will tell you what will be done, right? And mechanism. Example here, timer construction in your CPU is a mechanism which ensures the CPU protection. Right? Timer construct is a mechanism for ensuring the CPU protection. But deciding how long the timer to be set for a particular user is the policy decision. You're getting me? You can take an example here for understanding the difference between mechanism and the policy. When it is coming to the mechanism, right? Time construction is a mechanism which is used for the CPU protection. But here, policy will tell you how much time you should be given to each user is the policy, right? So the separation of the policy and mechanism is very important for your flexibility, right? And when it is coming to the policies are likely to change across the places over the time, right? And whenever you want to make a change in the policy, it would require a change in the underlying mechanism also. You're getting me? A change in the policy would require redefinition of the certain parameters of the system. So if you want to change any policy, as I told you, if you take the previous example only, how much time you want to give it to the user. Then if you want to change the policy means it requires the definition of some parameters of the system. And you have to keep in mind that whenever you are changing a policy, definitely it requires a change in the mechanism also. So that is all about your mechanism and policies. Next comes with the implementation part. So here is not written, but I'll tell you. So implementation is nothing but how your operating system is implemented. As I told you, and you all know that operating system is a collection of many programs written by many people over a period of time. Yes or no? Right? If you take the OS, it is a collection of many programs. The OS is not written by a single person. It was written by many people over a long period of time, right? And then here, once you design the operating system, then it must be implemented, right? And if you take the operating system, most of the operating systems are written in assembly language and the high-level language, like C, C++, Python, Perl, shell scripts like this. These are the different languages which are used to written your actual operating system. And if you take any operating system, it can be written in more than one language, right? It can be written in more than one language. Here, the low level of the kernel might be assembly language, and high-level routines can be written in C. And the system programs can be written in C, C++. And the interpreted scripting languages like Perl, Python, or shell scripts. Right? For low-level things, use assembly language, and high-level routines can be written in C, and your system programs can be written in C, C++, and some interpreted scripting languages also used like Perl, Python, or in shell scripts, right? So best example is like if you take an Linux operating system, it includes programs written in all of those languages, right? So what is the advantage of using the high-level languages for implementing the operating system is the code can be written fast and easier to understand and debug. But only disadvantage here is because it is having lots of code, right? It takes so much time to execute the program, and it takes so much of memory, right? So this is all about your design goals, mechanisms and policies, and implementation, right? So clear for you all? Yes? Design goals like a choice of hardware and requirement specification, mechanism and policies, right? What is mechanism, what is policies, and how the change in policy will affect the mechanism. And then implementation, if you take the operating system which was written by different people over the time, right? It is using so many languages, like assembly level, high level languages and scripting languages, right? So, as I told you, OS can be written in more than one languages. Your low level will be implemented with assembly languages, and high level routines are written in C, C++ like that, which can system programs are written in C, C++ and interpreted with the scripting languages, right? So, advantages of using high level languages is the code can be written faster and easier to understand and easy to debug, but disadvantages take so much of time for execution, and it requires so much memory also to store the programs, right? So one best example is Linux operating system, which includes all the languages which I mentioned here, C, C++, right? Then assembly level languages, then scripting languages, all these are. Why? Because Linux is open source and all of the functions are defined in a single operating system. That means each can be added as the modules, right? I'll show you example when I am discussing with the Solaris operating system in the next topics, right? So it is clear for you all, design and implementation, so that I can move with the other topic. Yes or no? I will be sharing the notes with you. You don't worry, you read the notes once you can understand better, right? Yes, then move to the structures, operating system structures, right? So these are the types of structures, like simple structure, layered approach, microkernels, modules, and hybrid systems. Right. So for simple structure, the example is like MS-DOS, right? Then we have like Unix operating system and layered approach we will see, and we'll see what are the advantages and disadvantages with the layered approach. Then we discuss with the microkernels, right? And advantages and disadvantages with the microkernels. Then we see modules, right? Then we discuss about the hybrid system. So under this hybrid systems, we are going to learn about Mac operating system and iOS and Android operating system, right? So before we are actually going into the types of structures, right? So your operating system structure can be multi-programming system or time-shared system. Time-shared you can also call as multitasking system, right? Right? If you broadly categorize the OS structure, it can be structured into two types. Multi-programming system, that means where multiple jobs can be executed at a time, right? To make the CPU utilization properly, which increases the CPU utilization. Then time shared is also an extension of multi-programming, but here the jobs are means the users are going to share the CPU in the timely basis, right? So I have some points about multi-programming system and the time sharing system. You want me to take those points now, or else if I give the notes, you can read. Very simple, ma. Multi-programming means what? Multiple jobs can be executed at a time. Why? Because if a single program is being executed, it cannot keep either CPU or IO devices busy all the time, right? Yes or no, right? So this multi-programming increases the CPU utilization, right? By organizing the jobs so that the CPU always has one job to execute, right? So for doing this, it keeps the multiple jobs in the memory simultaneously, and it is not possible to keep all the programs at a time in the main memory. Then what it will do is, it will keep the jobs in the secondary memory on the disk in the job pool, right? We have a buffer called job pool. This job pool consists of all the processes residing on the disk, awaiting for the main memory. That means if the jobs in the main memory are executed, then the jobs from the job pool can be loaded into the main memory, right? Yes, external storaging, same thing. On the disk, they will be stored, right? Means for that we have a special memory space called job pool. So in that job pool, all the jobs which are ready to execute will be loaded, right? Then main of jobs will be being executed in the main memory, and whenever one job requires IO, right, then immediately the other job will be given to the CPU. Other job will be given CPU, so that we are keeping the CPU busy all the time, right? So that is all about multi-programming. But when it is coming to the multitasking, right, multitasking or time sharing, right? In the time sharing system, CPU executes multiple jobs by switching among them. So one job is executed for 1 second, immediately it will be switching to second job, it executes the second job for 1 second, then switch to third job. Like that, it is going to execute the job one after another by switching among them, right? Here the switches occur so frequently that the user can interact with the other programs while it is running. So here the time sharing requires the interactive computers. It means here the processes will interact with each other. And always remember, in the time shared systems, the response time should be less than 1 second, right? It can be less than 1 second, right? So here the time shared systems allows many users to share the computer simultaneously, right? Only a little CPU time is needed for each user, right? Because the system switches rapidly from one user to other user, it gives an impression that the entire system is dedicated to one user only. So each user thinks that the entire system is given to him only. Why? Because here it is switching between the systems very rapidly, that the user is unaware of that his job is paused for a moment and other job was given, right? And it is switching back to his job, right? So that is all about your time shared and multi-programmed. Now coming to the structures, here, right? The first one is the simple structure, under that, the best example is MS-DOS, right? When it is coming to MS-DOS, I can say it is written to provide the most functionality in the least space. That means as a single whole, it was developed. So that is the reason I can say MS-DOS operating system do not have a well-defined structure. So here, it means when the people are writing the code for this MS-DOS, when the people are developing this MS-DOS, they never thought that this would become more popular, right? This would become more popular. That is the reason they written this MS-DOS with a limited functionality, I can say, right? and it is going to do all the things in as the single unit, right? So it was designed and implemented by few people and started as small, simple and limited system, and then grew beyond their original scope that the implementers did not imagine it would be so popular. Right? They implemented by very few people, started as a small operating system, very simple and limited. But it grew beyond their original scope, right? Because it was developed as a small, simple and limited system. In MS-DOS, the interfaces and levels of functionalities are not well separated. Right? I can say in MS-DOS, the interfaces and levels of functionalities are not well separated. Seema, this everything I am taking in points wise, right? You can take the points, right? In MS-DOS, the interfaces and levels of functionalities are not well separated. And I can say in MS-DOS, application programs are able to access the basic IO routines to write directly to the display and the disk drivers, right? Here, the application programs are able to access the basic IO routines to write directly. They can directly write on the disks and they can directly write on the displays. So such freedom leaves MS-DOS vulnerable to errant and malicious programs, causing the entire system crashes when user programs fails. Right? Because everything is accessible. Your entire MS-DOS operating system is accessible by the users. Here there is no separation like user programs, system programs, and there is no privileged mode like that, right? Here the application programs have the access to all the things like they can go to the drivers, device drivers and ROM BIOS device drivers, everything can be accessible by the application program. So that is the reason, right? It's vulnerable to errant users and the malicious programs and causing the entire system crashes when a user program fails, right? So this is the structure of your MS-DOS. Right? So this is your traditional Unix system. I can say original Unix operating system. If you take the original operating system, right? It also have the limited structuring. It was limited by its hardware functionality, right? And if you take the this Linux operating system, right? It is consisting of two separate parts. One is kernel part and the other one is system programs part. And again, when it is coming to the kernel is further separated into series of interfaces and the device drivers which have been added and expanded over the years as Unix has evolved, right? It is coming to traditional Unix operating system. It is consisting of two parts, right? One is kernel part, the other one is system programs part, right? Then the kernel is further separated to a series of interfaces and the device drivers. When you take this, you have IO drivers, right? CPUs. These are the different parts, interfaces in the kernel. If you say these are the different further division of your kernel, right? And when it is coming to the traditional Unix operating system, I can say it is not only the simple structure, but also layered structure to some extent. If you take this, I can say this is not only the simple structure, but also extended to the layered structure to some extent, right? Like you have here, I can categorize them like this. So above the kernel and below the kernel, right? Above the kernel and below the kernel. I can say everything below the system calls and above the physical hardware is the kernel. And what the services here the kernel is going to provide is the kernel is providing you the file system, CPU scheduling, memory management, and other operating systems through the system calls. And all these functionalities to be combined into one level. All right. That means kernel is nothing but what? It's a part of operating system. So what the operating system is doing, the kernel will provide like CPU scheduling, file system, memory management and all. So this entire thing will be treated as one level, below that one level, above that one level. So that is the reason I can say the Unix operating system is a layered structure to some extent, right? You're getting me? And through the system calls, all these functionalities to be combined into one level, right? And I can also say, because when it is coming to DOS, the simple structure, I can say it is a monolithic structure. You have only one layer, right? Because it is monolithic structure, it was difficult to implement and maintain. It was difficult to implement and maintain, right? So this is all about the first category, that is simple structure. Next, coming to this layered structure, layered approach, right? So in the layered approach, the operating system is broken into a number of layers. Very simple. What is this layered approach is? See, when the job is simple, only one person can do it. If the job is complex, the job is divided into multiple parts and each part is given to one person, so that different means the group of people can able to solve it, right? So that the same thing is implemented here. Layered approach means because the operating system is very big and as a single unit it is very difficult to maintain. So that is the reason it was divided into the layers, right? So an operating system is divided into a number of layers, right? I can also call them as levels. The layers are also called as levels. So if you take the levels, the bottom level, the layer 0, right, is the hardware, and the highest layer is the user interface. And in between, what are the layers are there? Those are the layers of the operating system. Right? So the operating system layers consisting of data structures and a set of routines that can be invoked by high-level layers and can also be invoke the operations on the lower level layers. So that means what are the operating system layers are there? They are consisting of data structures and set of routines. What they do is they will take the request from the higher level layers. That means from the user, right? And for providing the services to the user, they can invoke the operations on lower level layers, that is on the hardware. Right? So operating system is an implementation of an abstract object made up of data and the operations that can manipulate those data. I can say OS layer is an implementation of an abstract object that can manipulate those data. So this is the example for this layered operating system. Right? This is the example for layered operating system. So the layer 0 is hardware and layer N is user interface, and the between layers are your operating system layers. So operating system layers will be invoked by the user interface and take the services from the hardware, right? So you have some set of advantages and disadvantages with the layered approach. So just take down the points, advantages and also the disadvantages, right? So the main advantage of layered approach is simplicity of construction and debugging. Each layer uses functions and the services of only lower level layers. So if you take here any layer, that layer will take the services from the lower level. So layer 1 will take the services from layer 0. Layer 2 will take from layer 1. Layer 3 will take from like that. So first this layer N will give the request to the N-1. That way these will be passed through all the layers, and at layer 1, layer 1 will invoke the services from layer 0, right? So this approach simplifies the debugging and the system verification, right? So you can debug step by step and find out where actually the error occurred. So that is the reason I can say it is
It simplifies the debugging and the system verification, right? Here the first layer can be debugged without any concern for the rest of them, because it uses only the basic hardware and the implementation of its functions. So if you take layer 1, if you take the first layer, it can be debugged without disturbing the below layers. Why? Because the error is at the first layer, means you can identify the error in that layer only, because the down layers are not yet started interacting with the above layers, right? Let's consider if something happened at layer n-1, then layer n and n-1 both will be verified. That way it can be done, right? So once the first layer is debugged and functions correctly, while the second layer is debugged and so on, the same thing which I told you just now. If an error found during the debugging of a particular layer, the error must be on that layer, because the layers below are already debugged, right? And one more advantage of this layered structure is data hiding. Each layer is implemented only with operations provided by the lower layers. I can say one of the advantage with this is data hiding. So whatever is happening in one layer will not be known to the other layer. So that means a layer need not to know how these operations are implemented. Instead, a layer must know what those operations do. That's all, right? So what the below layers are doing, only the layer has to know. It means it need not to know that how they are done. See, if I gave you a task and you divided among 4 people, right? After doing that, right, you just want to know them what they have performed. Means what they have performed instead of how they have performed. Right? So the same thing is here. Each layer hides the existence of certain data structures, operations, and the hardware from the higher layers. Right? These are the advantages with the layered approach. So I am providing you the notes after this. Don't worry. This is only the theory part. You can go through it. Right? Am I going fast? Do let me know. See, because it is theory, advantages, disadvantages only. I'm taking the points quick, right? Am I going fast or you? Please do let me know. Is it okay or am I going fast? Go slow. Okay, fine. Right. So coming to the disadvantages with the layered approach, major difficulty with the layered approach involves it involves appropriately defined the various layers. That means a layer can use only the lower level layers, hence we have planned carefully which layer to be kept in which place. If you take the layers, right, only a layer can use only the lower level layers, because we kept the layers in such a way that each layer will get access only to use the lower level layer. So for this one example is the device driver for the backing store must be at the lower level than the memory management routine, because the memory management requires the ability to use the backup storage. So we have to load the things in such a way that first we keep the memory backup storage, then above that memory management routine, so that memory management routine can make use of the backup storages, right? And normally this backup storage driver would reside above the CPU scheduler, because the drivers may need to wait for IO and the CPU can be rescheduled during the time. Right? If you take the CPU scheduler should be always below the backing storage. Right? The CPU scheduler should be below the backing storage. Why? Because whenever the program is running and the drivers needs to wait for the IO, right? And the CPU can be rescheduled during this time. So means here the backing storage devices, the drivers should take the services from the CPU schedulers, right? And one more problem with the layered implementation is that they tend to be less efficient. That means at each layer, the parameters may be modified, data may need to be passed and so on. That means here each layer adds overhead to the system call, right? Because these are divided into layers, each layer runs independently and each layer can make the modifications based on the requirement, all right? So that means whenever any user is changing its parameters, right, here the data may need to be passed and so on. That means how this communication takes place through the system call. So that is the reason I can say here each layer adds some overhead to the system call. Why? Because through the system calls only the layers are going to be communicated here, right? And when a user program executes the IO operation, it executes a system call that is trapped to the IO layer, which calls memory management, which in turn calls CPU scheduling, which is then passed to the hardware. That means why I am telling it is less efficient is to do a job, right? See, here the best example I can tell is 10 people are standing in a row, right? The person 1 wants to communicate with person 10. Because it is the layered approach, how the communication takes place is the person 1 will talk to person 2, person 2 will talk to person 3, again will talk to person 4, like that it reaches the person 10. So that is, it takes so much time and it makes it inefficient. That is the reason I am telling the layered implementation is tend to be less efficient. Right? You are getting me? And if one person changing its parameter, he has to inform to the all other layers. That means in terms of the system calls. That means it puts more overhead on the system calls. So that is the reason I can take a system call takes longer time on the layered system than on the non-layered systems. Right? So this is all about the advantages and disadvantages with the layered approach. Next, coming to the microkernels. What do you mean by this microkernels? See, coming to this Unix operating system, the kernel also becomes large and difficult to manage. That means the OS file, the kernel will become large and very difficult to manage, right? Then what happened is in the year of 1980s, in the mid 1980s, the researchers in the Mellon University developed an operating system called MACH, M-A-C-H, right? That modularizes the kernel using the microkernel approach. So in the microkernel approach, what they do is, again, they try to reduce the kernel size. Right? That means it removes all non-essential components from the kernel and implement them as the system and user level programs, which results the smaller kernel. That smaller kernel is nothing but the microkernel. Right? And then how this microkernel is going to communicate with them is, right, by using the message passing. Right? So, with this, the microkernels provide the minimal process and the memory management and also providing the communication facility. And how the communication takes place here is using the message passing. So this is the kernel environment. We have match. What is BSD? What is BSD? So it is a kind of environment. I can say it is Berkeley software distribution, right? Berkeley software distribution. It is a kind of multi-programming supported operating system, I can say, right? So this part, this Mac part and the BSD part will be running in the kernel, and the remaining everything has been moved to the application environment, right? And then these arrow marks will show you that the communication. So here the communication takes place by using the message passing communication, right? And all the services will be taken. So what are the advantages of this microkernel? So I can say this kind of structure is what I can say. Yeah, this kind of structure, I can say it is a client server kind of thing. It's a kind of client server thing. That means when a client program wants to access a file, first it should interact with the file server, right? Then that file server will provide the services to the client, right? And then they can able to perform the task, right? So if you take the advantages, microkernel approach makes extending the operating system easier, right? So all your services are added to the user space and consequently do not require modification of the kernel. Right, all functions of the operating system like file management, memory management, everything will be at the user space only, right? And even though when the kernel must have to be modified, the changes in the kernel will be very few because the microkernel is a smaller kernel. So even though if you are making any changes to the kernel, it won't make much effect on the kernel because here the kernel is very small. So the resulting operating system is easier to port from one hardware design to another because it is very, very small. You can simply port them from one device to another device. So here the microkernel also provides more security and reliability because most services are running as the user processes rather than the kernel processes. Because these are like all the services are at the user level. If one service fails also, the remaining operating system, it works properly, right? Because the rest of the operating system remains untouched because here at the application level only all the routines are being executed. So if one program at the user level fails, it won't affect the kernel, right? Because there is no interaction with the kernel there. But one disadvantage with the microkernels is, right, the performance. Because here there is so much overload on the system functions. I can say the performance of the microkernels can suffer due to increased system function overhead. Due to increased system function overhead. Next, coming to the modules. So, most of the modern operating system implements the kernel modules. That means loadable kernel modules are the current best methodology for the operating system design. Right? So in this, the kernel has a set of core components and the links in the additional services via modules, either at boot time or during runtime. This is the example of Solaris. So this is your core kernel, the inside, and it is having the links with the all other modules, right? So whenever you require the file system, that file system module will be loaded and your job will be done. So here the set of modules can be loaded at the boot time or else whenever they require, right? So this type of design is common in modern implementation of Unix, such as Solaris, Linux and Mac OS X as well as in Windows also. I can say this type of is common in the modern implementation of the all other operating system. So the basic idea of this design is for the kernel to provide core services while the other services are implemented dynamically as the kernel is running. Right? This linking services dynamically is preferable to adding new features directly to the kernel, which would require recompiling the kernel every time a change was made. So once you add one module, the kernel will be recompiled. Right? So example, we might build a CPU scheduling and memory management algorithms directly into the kernel, then add support for different file systems by the way of loadable modules. Right? So whenever you are loading a module, the kernel will be reloaded. So this is all about your modules. So this virtual machines thing we already discussed, yes or no? Right? Running one operating system in another operating system. Right? So for this you require VMware software. That VMware software will work as VMM, virtual virtual machine manager, I think, right? Then IBM was invented this, on which you are loading this VMware will become the host, and the operating systems which are running in the VMware are called guest. This part we already discussed, right? So this diagram I have not shown there. You can see the diagram here. This is non-virtual. You have only one kernel and it is running the programs. But in the virtual machine, you must implement this VMware software. What this will do is you can load multiple softwares as the guest operating systems. You can load multiple operating systems as the guest operating systems on a host operating system. So this VM1 will be your host. 2, 3 are loaded as the guest, I can say. And the next one is hybrid. This is not required for you. Okay, about the hybrid, it is not there. I think I will show you here. Yes. Yeah. We're done with this Solaris now. Yes. Coming to this hybrid, right? So you all know that most of the operating systems can combine different structures resulting in hybrid, right? So examples are given here. Linux and Solaris are monolithic and modular. Windows is largely monolithic and some part of So let's start with this Mac OS X. So here, yes, if you see this diagram, right, I can say the Apple Mac OS X operating system uses a hybrid structure and it is layered, right? So on top of it, you will be having the graphical user interface, which is Aqua user interface, right? And then you have application and environment services, like it is providing you Java platform, Cocoa, QuickTime, and BSD. BSD means for Linux, right? Cocoa is an API for the object-oriented programs like C program, C++ program, right? So which is used for writing the Mac OS X applications, right? And then Java, which provides you the consisting of primarily of the Mac OS, Mac microkernel, and then BSD Unix kernel. Right? This Mac is the microkernel, and then BSD for the Unix kernel, where you have shell scripting. Right? So here Mac provides this microkernel. This Mac microkernel provides memory management and support for remote procedure calls, RPC, and inter-process communication facilities, which includes the message passing and the thread scheduling. This Mac will provide you the core functions of the kernel, like memory scheduling, inter-process communication, remote procedure call, right? Which is through message passing and the thread scheduling. And BSD provides BSD command line interface with supports for networking and the file and an IO kit for development of device drivers and dynamically loadable modules. This IO kit, right? This IO kit as a part of the kernel environment will provide you the IO kit for developing the device drivers and dynamically loadable modules. Right? So this is all about your Mac OS. Then iOS. So iOS is a mobile operating system which is designed by Apple to run on iPhone and iPad. So for this, if you see the structure, Cocoa Touch, which is API for Objective-C, that provides the several frameworks for developing the applications that run on iOS devices. So for developing the applications on iOS devices, Cocoa Touch provides the API. Right? So in the previous thing, we have seen Cocoa. What is the difference between Cocoa and Cocoa Touch is, here hardware features which is unique to mobile devices such as touch screen, right? Cocoa Touch means it provides the services with the functions of touch screen, right? By touching the icon or by swapping like this, it is providing you the services. Next, Am I audible, ma? Actually, internet problem. I got disconnected, I think. Now, can you able to see me? Sorry, can you able to hear me? Yes? Am I audible to you now? Okay, ma. Wait a minute. Right. See, you all know that you can keep your applications in your Android store, right? So for that, what you have to do is first you have to, they has to be written in Java, right? So the Java class files are first compiled to Java bytecode, then translated into an executable file that runs on the Dalvik virtual machine, right? So that virtual machine was developed for the Android and it is optimized for mobile devices with limited memory and CPU processing capabilities, right? And the set of libraries are available for Android applications, which includes the framework for the developing web browsers. For that, it is providing the WebKit, right? And then database support, SQLite, and for multimedia, right? It is providing the media framework. And you have this LIBC, right? It is a library which is similar to like your CPU C library, but is smaller. It is developed for the slower CPU that characterizes the mobile devices, right? So for the mobile devices, it provides the library support, right? So this is all about your operating system structures, and with this we completed your unit 1. So I will share these notes with you today, the chapter 2 notes and the PPTs for chapter 1 and chapter 2, right? So I am starting the quiz, right? But is the time will be sufficient for you or not?